we've been talking a lot about artificial intelligence lately, with many companies saying they have begun looking into it. Now, remember, Microsoft also said in a survey that 2024 was the year AI in the workplace gets real. Well, one conglomerate that's putting its money where its mouth is Aboitiz. They've gone and set up a whole separate arm for AI called Aboitiz Data Innovation. And tonight, we're joined by ADI's CEO, David Hardoon. David, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Good evening.
Coming again, the same thing as I said to Ray. Thanks for braving rainy Manila traffic, rainy weather traffic.
It was fantastic.
It's part of the experience.
Okay, let's set the context here. What is ADI? What are you trying to do?
Yeah. So ADI, in short, Aboitiz Data Innovation, was set up to really kind of understand and solve one element in terms of everyone's been talking about data. Everyone's been talking about AI. But how does it, in the end of the day, really help a business? And from what we care about, ultimately, in terms of customer engagement, revenue opportunities, operational efficiency, P&L, effectively. Now, it's a conglomerate. It's a vast organization. So it could be things such as predicting the quality of shrimp. It can be from customer engagement in terms of financial products. If you think about BSP, at the end of the day, there's a massive effort in terms of financial inclusion. How do you do that when you have customers who don't have a historical record in terms of bank accounts? That's AI at the end of the day. And then I'll give you one last example, which I absolutely love, in terms of energy, power, predictive maintenance, making sure that we're mitigating brownouts and making sure there's stability.
Are any power plants here using that? Because
Yes.
we just had a brownout earlier and I had to reset the breaker.
Well, that's one of the things that we're rolling out right now. We just had an announcement a few days ago about Project Archangel, which essentially is creating the first smart power plant with a digital twin. So that will be coming up very soon. And essentially, if you think about it, we want to make sure that we're creating immense amounts of data assets. We're collecting data. But are we using it? Are we truly putting into practice where it's relevant? There are many times situations where you don't really need it. But there are plenty of aspects whereby it can make a genuine difference. It can make a astronomical value both as a consumer. I mean, we all have the ability of ordering food at home. Or from a business perspective in terms of how do we create those profits on opportunities, or as I mentioned, those savings. That's why we were created. And for the first 2 years of existence, we have been exclusively focusing on our businesses, validating it for ourselves. And for the last year, we've been going out and demonstrating that other organizations, leveraging our help, of course, can achieve it. And then recently, across Southeast Asia.
How expensive is it to integrate? For example, I own a coal power plant. I'm not yet done. I'm still stuck on that example.
You own a coal power plant?
I don't, but I wish I did, because I might actually try to make sure that it's operating properly and preventively maintained. If, for example, it's an old plant, maybe from the 80s or whatever, can I still engage your services? And
How does AI come into the picture?
yeah, and how can you insert it into an old mammoth of a factory?
So I want to kind of tease that down because, and in fact, that's one of the reasons I still do what I do and I'm fascinated about it, is you'll find that if you ask companies, are you doing AI? I would state that the vast majorities of them would say yes. However, if you ask them, are you using it on a day-to-day basis? Are you making decisions? Is it operational? They'll go, well, it's still experimentation. It's still a pilot. It's still a sandbox. So the thing that we've been focusing on, and I'll get to that aspect of the question, is how do we make it real? Now, what you find is, while there is a lot of emphasis and focus in terms of data, collecting it, putting the environments in place, using it, but there's also the aspect of the process. Does the engineer know how to use the information? How do they translate it? Is there a change in where things need to be done, and so forth? So you need to look at it holistically.
Right.
Why am I presenting that way? Is wise woman in my life, my mother, you don't boil the ocean to make a cup of tea. So you don't start and saying, okay, we're going to do that. No, we step by step. I would argue that you already have a lot of sensors in place because a lot of equipments come with it. Are you using it? Are you collecting it? If you don't have those sensors, you may need to put them in place, step by step by step by step, as well as realizing if actually you maybe want to replace the whole machine altogether.
Have you had to place engineers who understand AI and data across different businesses to be able to operationalize the technologies?
Yes. And that's exactly that bridge. It's not just about the AI technical data element. It's also about understanding the domain. So one of the things that kind of makes us I would argue slightly different, is that we're not just service providers and techies, which many times I refer to me as myself as one, or geek. We're also operators. So for example, if we're talking about power, we have people on board that have been doing power for 20, 25 years. They will talk about boilers until your ears falls off.
Right.
I'm an ex-regulator, so when we're thinking about an application of AI in financial crimes, what does that then mean to a fraud investigator? What does it mean from a regulatory perspective? It's bridging those two worlds. And once you do that, you realize two things. It's actually not that complicated. It can be done. It's not that
So it's
expensive.
more of upskilling rather than hiring people from outside?
Bingo. It's about, there may be, if you want to accelerate it, you may want to bring one or two or a few more people from outside, but fundamentally it's about upskilling.
You talked about validating the concept internally first
Yes.
within the Aboitiz group businesses before you roll it out. What lessons did you take away from that?
Well, patience. I think that's number one. And also an identification of, think of it as a bit of the recipe. I'll give you a very, very simple example. Especially now with AI, I don't like using the word a hype, but sometimes it can be. You want to jump in, you want to do, you enter conversations, David, how can you use AI?
Right.
That is the wrong question. However exciting it may be, unless you're a research agency, the question should be, we're trying to reach a broader audience. How can we do that? Well, I'm pretty sure we can actually use AI to achieve that. As I mentioned, finance. We want to be able to onboard and provide credit to customers who are thin file, no file, meaning they have no history. How do we do that? I'm pretty sure we can find AI solutions to a job. So it's the approach in which the engagement. Second one, to the point that you've mentioned of, how do we make sure we're also upskilling the people? Because at the end of the day, they need to use it. We need to make sure it's sustainable. And then finally, the cost. And I was reading something in terms of the Philippines' readiness to do AI. I would actually argue Philippines is more than ready. I can share a bit of stories. I don't know if you remember SAS. It used to be one of the first softwares
Yes.
of data analytics.
Yes.
Yeah.
The very first place that they've actually created relationships with university outside of the US was Philippines. And we're talking about several decades now. So there are a lot of skill sets. But now the question specifically in Philippines is the willingness.
Right.
We're doing it, others are starting, but what we need more is more willingness to explore and see the possibilities.
You're absolutely right. Sorry to reference another company, but we just had Microsoft as well as a guest, and they did a whole survey and found that yes, executives are, they're keen, they're looking into it. The vast majority say they're interested in integrating it, but it's a bit slow. Where do you think the reticence is coming from? Is it the cost? Is it just because the technology is so new, people are wait and see mode? Where is this coming from? Or
The
is that
boomers.
just
Is it coming from the boomers who are still in the C-suite? It could be.
Well, I think sometimes, well, perhaps they're younger kids and generation are kind of nudging them, like, why are you still doing it like that?
Yeah.
But I think the renaissance and is really coming from, seeing is believing. And what you're finding now is that there are so many actual cases out there. I mean, when you engage ChatGPT, when you're seeing Sona, when it's actually creating video, doesn't matter how or much of a disbeliever you are, you have to go like, this is phenomenal, this is fantastic. So that's also the approach that we've been taking. And in fact, one of the things that we've been doing over the last 3 years, in fact 4 years, because this really was incubated in the bank, Union Bank of the Philippines, is we've been very public about it. And the reason we were very public about it is because we wanted to look at what we're doing. It may not be applicable to you for one, but if we're willing to take the risk and it's successful for us, try as well. And if it wasn't successful for us, learn.
Help
In
us
your
believe.
experience,
Help us.
in your experience, to tie into what you, I think, is going to ask. In your experience here, at least with Philippine companies outside the Aboitiz group, how willing are these companies? And can you tell us if they're big, medium, or mostly I guess majority of Philippine companies fall under MSME?
So we've really been having a fantastic series of conversations, and there isn't even a uniform to it. It's from even other conglomerates that we've been working with. I'm a big believer of frenemies, if I use that kind of joking term, to government agencies, to smaller startups. We've been talking to all of them. It's really the question of the entry point. And that's why I mentioned it's really, really important to go, how can it be this relevant to you? How can this be relevant? And then what's the aspect of starting? Is the starting point training? Is the starting point looking into your system and your architecture? Is the starting point just doing a proof of concept? but thinking of already the process of, if this is successful, how it be used. Let me give you another, if I may, example.
We love examples here.
One of our businesses, which is our cement group, I still remember it. We said, okay, how can we use AI? How can we help them process? So when we sat down back then with the CEO of the time, he said, David, one of the challenges I have in terms of the process, just to share very briefly, and by the way, cement is the second most used substance outside of water, is they make many, many, many samples, wait 28 days, and destroy it. Because it's extremely important to know what's the strength of cement. AI, in the end of the day, is simply the capacity to find a pattern. Et voila. Long story short, ability to predict what is a compressive strength in advance. 50% reduction in energy.
Wow.
Reduction in wastage. Quantifiably measuring 35 kilotons reduction in CO2 emissions.
Nice.
I was going to say that hits the environmental targets as well.
Amazing.
And I will be honest enough to say we didn't even start thinking about that. We really were thinking about the money, how much we
Yeah.
can save on
So
doing.
how much have you saved?
We've saved in the 7 digits. It really was significant. In fact, it's deployed and operational in all the manufacturing plants right now. AI data, when done right, and I know that's a bit of a loaded statement, but when done right, pays for itself. Because how can you not do better when you know more? AI is about knowing more.
Knowledge is power.
If I'm a new business, where do I start? I mean, you talked about starting points.
Yeah.
Does it differ from a business to the other? Is it all about convincing, for one, my superiors, the funders, the investors to invest in this technology? Is that the first case that you need to solve?
I would perhaps start one step before. The first step before is, and arguably,
The first step is to call David.
Right?
yes,
David, I need your help.
it's, well, what's the business objective? What is it that you're trying to do? And again, it could be as simple of the bosses require me to increase my revenue or my sales target by 50%, by 5%, compress. Literally, what is that underlying objective? Second question is, have we been collecting data? Have we been storing it? Have we not? Because why that becomes really important is because if you don't really know what you're trying to achieve, I would kind of say, don't even go down that path of AI. Focus on what is it that you're trying to achieve. Second question, which will impact the investment of, is there data? You know what? Don't even worry about how much. Is there? That then results to the ability of saying, okay, if I'm able to achieve a 10% improvement, I will save this much. You see what you've done now? You literally know, if it's going to cost me $1, but I can make 5, it pays for itself. If I'm going to only make half a centavo, but it's going to cost me 1, you know what? Maybe it's not worthwhile. That is the underlying secret. And once you do it, that's why I mentioned it becomes a bit more obvious. It's still difficult, it's still convincing, but it becomes easier.
Right.
When he talks about it, it becomes so simple. I mean, that's why.
I told you, call David. Talking about what you're trying to achieve, ADI is trying to be ambitious about this whole thing.
Yeah.
You're not just targeting the Philippines
No.
market. You're targeting all of Southeast Asia. Give us a better sense of what the AI race is looking like in ASEAN and where the Philippines stands.
So one of the exciting things that I really believe Philippines has almost I would argue an edge, even over countries like Singapore, who is technologically has been adopting AI for quite some time, is that there's the opportunities here. Real opportunities with very quantifiable value. Like I mentioned in terms of cement, I didn't even talk about the shrimps, we have stuff across the board. Those are the real examples. As I mentioned, the challenge of making it real is not unique to Philippines. Everyone has the exact same problem. Well, and that's what we've been finding. When we're talking to companies, financial institutions, power companies across the board, that's exactly what they're asking us in terms of, well, how did you make it real? Can you help us accelerate? Can we minimize the risk? Suddenly we're in a position whereby Philippines is exporting the know-how to deploy
Because there are
AI.
applications already here.
Exactly.
What are digital twins?
So a digital twin, and this is a really fun thing, is effectively replicating anything. It could be literally from a studio, from a person, if you're looking at medical, it could be a power plant, digitally, down to the minute detail. Why? So that then if you're able to monitor it, you don't have to be physically in the plant. You can digitally review it, identify if there's an issue, all the way. One wonderful example is you could zoom into a 1 millimeter pipe in a center of a plant because it's been replicated. So now your ability to oversee, understand, and operate becomes, well...
Does it
like I said,
adjust
remote.
real time?
That's the goal. That's the objective.
But David, let's talk about like setting up that virtual model or the digital twin. Do you need like the blueprints, especially like here in the Philippines? Sometimes you have blueprints, but you realize the ducting for the air conditioning units were never in the blueprints to begin with. Do you use LiDAR or any other sort of tool?
Exactly. That's why many times it isn't the AI, it isn't the data. It's the process. It's the alignment with what you think and what it is. And in fact, at times what you find is that is really the investment. I mean, I don't want to throw more jargons, but there's something known as technical debt, whereby you kind of have to, like you just said right now, realize, oh, actually the duct is not where we thought it is. That's the technical debt to update your blueprints. It is extremely important, but again, it's a worthwhile investment.
It is.
I want to give you one more example, if I may, which is one of the things of exports out of the Philippines that we've been doing as well, and where it can also help people, us. One of the projects we're working on, it's not deployed yet, but one of the projects we're working on, we call it Project Salvation. We're using satellite information, geospatial, topological information, weather, to predict landslides.
Wow.
Now, having that ability to be able to identify a risk of landslide before it occurs, from an equipment point of view, from a planning perspective, and
That's,
more so from saving lives.
Right, right.
Now-
Also forms part of the climate smart agriculture
Exactly.
space. Right?
So AI can be used in elements of, as I mentioned, from a revenue all the way to genuinely saving
Can we
lives.
do that in the West Philippine Sea?
I knew she was going to ask
Yeah, for sure.
because she's producing a documentary in the West Philippine Sea, so I knew she was going to ask that.
As long as they're patents.
And data.
Okay.
And data.
We are going to have to leave that there. Good to hear that the key message is that there are plenty of opportunities. AI is not a threat. Thank you so much for your time today. David Hardoon, CEO of Aboitiz Data Innovation.